Welcome back to the Corporate Governance Program. David, before the break, we've talked about lots of useful advice and ideas for improving corporate governance. But what do you think are some of the factors preventing small and medium enterprises from, I suppose, adopting good governance practices?
I think the biggest challenge has at first to do with the subtlety associated with the returns from investments in corporate governance. I think that because it is steeped in the longer-term perspective, and business owners tend to think about performance tomorrow and performance today, they tend to miss out. And that's something that they need to spend some time about, which is looking at studies, looking at the actual results attributed to making investments in corporate governance. So that's one of the challenges. I think that also we need to become better taxpayers. We need to be more fiscally transparent, and larger companies do become more transparent. And I'm not entirely certain why that's a natural tendency. I suspect it has to do with the increased number of stakeholders that larger firms have and their need to satisfy the number of stakeholders. I think that there is a role for the tax authority to play in providing incentives for firms to be as transparent as possible for the sake of transparency. If it has such evident and prospective returns for the private sector, certainly the government will see that too. I think that the rating agencies have roles to play. I think there needs to be more domestic rating agencies that can make better comparisons to domestic and international best practices. I think that's an important way to start too.
So I think one of the things you're saying is the companies need to change their focus from the short term to the long term. If you're trying to build an institution or a longer term sustainable business, then perhaps you need to pay some tax along the way and become a bit more transparent. And Dr. Arfa Sajjad, what did you find in terms of information disclosure and transparency among the companies that you surveyed?
Well, the survey reveals that as far as compliance with the company's ordinance and the SECP code is concerned, companies are complying with it. They do have financial statements, they do have auditor's report, they do have director's report. But now if we come to some of the disclosure which has become best practice in many parts of the world, like disclosure about intangible assets, environment, social performance, risk management, forward-looking information, companies in Pakistan are generally reluctant to disclose that information. One of the reasons identified in the survey is that in those countries where this kind of information relating to risk management, forward-looking information, what we usually call narrative reporting, has made it to the annual reports, it has made it through institutional investors' activism. Investors have demanded that information. It has come into the annual reports because that enables them to make informed decisions. Thus, the survey recommends that investors in Pakistan also need to be a bit more active and demand more information, and that will help them in their decisions.
We've been talking about, I suppose, the education focusing at the company level, but there is also a need to educate the investors so they can perhaps become a bit more demanding of the company.
Yes. Well, now that you've talked about it, one of the main recommendations of this survey is that institutional investors in Pakistan need to play an active role in the development of corporate governance when they are on the board meetings, when they should behave as share owners rather than shareholders only.
That's a very good point. And Dr. Abid Barki, since we've been talking about ways of improving governance practices in Pakistan, let's say you were made the Minister for Corporate Governance in Pakistan. What are some of the first things that you would do?
Well, I would like to learn from the experiences of other countries where I think family business groups are playing an important role. There is hardly I think few companies in the United States which has more than 20% shareholding in a company, whereas you will find many in Pakistan and also in other South Asian countries, in Korea, I think in Spain, in Germany, in Japan, I think. So there are so many examples where the traditional corporate governance probably code may not apply as well. So as I mentioned earlier, that there is a significant part of our ownership that is in the family and business groups. One of the things that was just mentioned about the education, the findings do show that the successors in business groups have performed better than the founders. And the reason being, and this is particularly true for those where education, they have like formal or informal education of their successors. So they are doing much better than their founders. So that is also, so I think that indicates that education can also play an important role. Human capital development, human resource development in corporate sector, that can also play an important role. So I would think that that the revised corporate governance code should give due credit to the family business groups in Pakistan because they have an important role to play.
Another interesting point I'd